Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about the education system in India. I'll be going through a lot of topics, like how we can improve the syllabus, how we can improve quality of teaching, quality of student uh, consumption, meaning how they can consume the content of the courses, how to diversify a little more, especially on the syllabus front. What are the infrastructure problems? What are the administration problems? Um, what are some of the problems that currently exist in the system? Overall, I have been in and out of the system, both school for the whole thing till 12th standard and then a bachelor's degree. So I kind of understand it more from a student perspective. I've got a little bit of clue of how the teacher's perspective works and how the setup is at a government level. So basically, the funding for schools happens through the state government. Usually, the money comes from the central government budget allocation for education, which happens every year. So that money is transferred to the states, and the states have to use that for the purposes of education. So this is how we have public education system in our country. The government, as you all know, operates government schools, hires government teachers under government payroll, and they give nearly free education, um, which is very valuable. At least I think till 8th standard, it's free education. After that, gotta pay something, I think. But for the money that it takes the student to get the education, it's good, but that doesn't mean it's great. And I will also talk a little bit about the misconceptions about how our education system is currently focused on and how this affects us. Because in the end of the day, let's begin here. I mean, what is the goal of the education system? Basically, the education system is a means by which you learn how to read and write. Hopefully, you get some skills that will be useful for you when you get out of the school system. When you complete, say, a 10th standard or 12th standard, there is a certain level of competency that is expected of you when you go out, whether you are going into the labor market or whether you're going into higher education or if you're going into business, whatever it is, there's a certain level of competency, core competencies that are required of you, which is why we have exams. And the exams are a way of understanding if the person has achieved these core competencies. And I think this is where the first problem starts, right? So we have exams for testing the subjects that we learn: maths, English, science, social, language, which is mostly native language. And I guess this is where the problem really starts, because one of the first things our exam pattern dictates is that you must have the ability to memorize. And our 10th standard examination, 12th standard examination focuses so heavily on memorization and the ability to remember learned concepts that, if we are being absolutely honest here, this level of memorization power is probably not essential in the job market. So that's how terrible it is. The focus on memory and just memory. So there are several other skills, right? There are skills like analytical understanding, cross-functional understanding. There are things like spatial understanding, understanding of data, development of concepts. So there are so many other different aspects in which people can actually develop their core skills, and yet we choose memory as the only thing. Now, memory is extremely important, don't get me wrong. it is probably very fundamental, because when you learn a concept, the ability to retain and apply it over and over again should not be a function of you having gained the experience, but it should be rather be acquired because you have a, a remembrance of the concept and an active recall of it. And I think this is one of the reasons why memory is very important. But the extra focus on memory is kind of killing our brain cells, if we're being absolutely honest. Because our brain is not just composed of memory sections, right? We've got several other sections of the brain which create or tend to activate different neurological paths. And these different neurological paths are in turn what drives us, what keeps us healthy and our brains active. And I think when we miss in these aspects, what we do is we start missing in the development process of a person. And this is the reason why I have a problem with the education system, because today what's happening is our focus on just memory-based education is killing the brain cells of the children, right? When the children come out of school, we are expecting them to have some kind of neurological makeup, to have some kind of brain development, right? But unfortunately, what we're doing is we're creating a system where these children can only have brain development in certain areas. And what this does is it creates deficiencies for these students in other areas. Another more pertinent fact of this is that not everybody is able to memorize, right? And yet somehow the memory sections of our brain are not the only thing that exist. Memory is very important and it's huge, but memory itself is not just like a hard disk in which you store data. That's not how it is. Memory can be interconnected. It can be imagery, it can be voice, it can be smell, it can be taste, it can be what you see, what you imagine, what you think of. All of these things form part of the memory. And so the idea that you have to read a book and memorize just from reading the book is one of the things that really bothers me, because you get the feeling that the idea of memorization, or even the idea of memorization, is just shrinked up into just read the book and vomit it in the examination. And this is one of the major problems of our system. In India, this is very prevalent. In every state, this is how it is. And it's unfortunate. I'm guessing that this is common throughout the world, because, I mean, one thing I've noticed is that we say things are bad in India. There are some countries where things are worse. There are some countries where things are better. We are usually, whenever we look at the ranking, we are like 25 percentile in the ranking. Usually that's where we are, meaning there are terrible places, but there are better places, like 75% of countries are better than us. And usually that's how our current ranking is in any system. But we are improving. And that's the good thing, right? We are improving over time. You can see with a number of people who have become educated and who have started going into the institutions where education is to be propagated, you see a little bit of improvement. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of improvement can be done, but it's being stifled. You know, one of the most important aspects of this is the amount of studies, data, information, and the ease of access of this information with the burst of the internet and other revolutionary technologies like Google search, YouTube, and all these different things have created a space where you can access high quality scientific data or any studies, not just scientific, non-scientific studies, which you can use to form syllabus even with the internet, which is very interesting. Of course, we don't want our syllabuses to be created from the internet, but there are so many studies made. There are years and years of model where people have studied students, class groups, school groups, school localities, meaning local areas where there are several schools, and they've studied those students who have taken certain different types of life topics in their schools. And then you have, the studies based on communities, how the performances of the students are based on their communities, what are the expectations, and how a single system used throughout across the board for education is really detrimental to society or the development of education in a society. And so one of the things that kind of bothers me is that even with all of this information, we still have not managed to change education for the good at the rate in which we should be changing. And usually this is a very common feature of any government system, where they're not really motivated to innovate. They're not motivated to, change the existing systems. They're very conservative. They're very cynical of change. And I think this has to change if we're being frank here. The world is moving very fast and we are not keeping up with it. Unfortunately, so this will not be a problem if we are a small country with a very small population. The problem is we are a large country with a very large population, and to be able to provide for a large country with such a huge population is not easy. And if we keep relying on the government, it's not going to work out. But that's beyond the point of today's discussion. The point is that education is always a means to something. It has always been this way. It is a means to something. But what is happening today, unfortunately, is that people that only go through the education system without awareness of the outside, they come out and they cannot do anything. They are literally physically impaired. They just don't have either the motivation to go out and do something, or they don't know how to do something. And I do think a lot of the reasons why people don't do anything is because they don't know what to do. And what we are creating is purposeless people in our country, our system. And this is a huge problem, because what happens is the primary motivation of a purposeless person becomes just going and working in a job, earning salary, and that's it, but not producing anything. Now you see this changing a lot with the startup culture in the technology space, but this level of enthusiasm for entrepreneurship has not been sparked outside of the technology space, right? And this brings me to the point of what I'm trying to say. Education has to be a driver of innovation, of business, of ideas, of things like this that are extremely useful to society. So one of the big issues in all of this is the quality of education provided. And I've touched upon the memory aspect. Now let's go and see the other aspects and what type of aspects I'm talking about. Not every child, yes, can understand a concept as easily as another person. Not every child has the ability to memorize one concept as opposed to another person. The challenge is in finding out what are the different brain functions, right, that are available to a human being, for an average human being, at birth, and to offer a solution that encompasses all of these brain functions, whether that's memory, linguistics, function of taste, smell, complex emotions, understanding complex problems, giving complex solutions, being able to build something. So a lot of people, they are able to focus on something and build it into a tangible form. There are some people that have the ability to think in abstracts. Right? So these are all not functions of memory. These are all functions of the human brain. There are functions of things like of critical thinking, analytical thinking, expansive thinking, like taking a topic and just expanding on it. A lot of people have that ability. But how do you hone these different skills? Right? You have to take some of the average brain functions that is at least done at an intellectual level, not at a physical or materialistic level, but at least at an intellectual level, and apply that to the syllabus. So one of the strides that many of the on many of the education systems in our country try to take us. They try to include analytical thinking and critical reasoning and all of that. And you see this with the entrance exams, like IIT JEE, entrance exams in MBA courses, and some other things like that. What you see is a focus on critical reasoning, analytical thinking, data interpretation, meaning taking large amounts of data and forming strong, conclusive ideas and opinions on it, correct opinions on it. And these are all extremely valuable concepts. What happens in our country is that we've got a huge number of talented people, right? But they're not honed in these skills specifically, or even if not specifically, deliberately. I think that's very important, to deliberately train these skills. That people tend to come out and have no real understanding of how the real world works. The real world is much more complicated. The real world is not as time-consuming as education, but it's much more complicated to navigate. It's much more challenging and hard, and it seems like, it's vast and never-ending. But some of these tools can be help people that come through the education system to live a better life. That's the ultimate goal of it, right? When a person comes out of an education system, they should be able to live a better life. So what do we mean by a better life? A better life means this person who has been living under a roof on another person's money can come out of the education system. They can build their own roof. They can, create their own opportunities at eating food and buying clothes. We must be able to empower our people to do that. Now, to empower your people to do that, what you do is you give them tools. You give them tools in order to develop their intellectual abilities, their physical abilities, their emotional abilities, so that they can become stronger individuals when you grow up. We don't seem to do any of that. And I think one of the reasons why I'm pointing this out is because, not to castigate anybody, but I do feel that if the syllabus does the absolute minimum of providing the option of including all of these features in the pattern, the next step would be to replicate this syllabus that you've created into the question paper patterns. And then the student will be forced to think of these things, even if he does not concentrate on them, or even if he doesn't develop each skill to a large extent. He is aware of these things, and he's able to pursue them at a later point in life if needed. But the problem is we never give our students the opportunity to do this, right? It is one of the reasons why people that do math well in school, especially in India, generally go out and do better in all the other aspects of life. It's because our focus on memory means that the only other aspect that deviates from pure memory is maths, and the people that do well in it usually tend to do better in life. Now, that's not always the case. There are exceptions to the rule where even people that are poor at maths have done great in life. And by great, I mean they're able to build a good life for themselves. They've lived comfortably all their life. They've got good savings. They've got a level head, zero debt. They're able to, inspire others, meaning they're able to raise children that are also emotionally strong and very, very level-headed, very disciplined. They themselves are disciplined. And you see those exceptions, people who don't know math, who don't like math, but are still like this. But then you mostly see people with a math background who usually do well. And I think this is an indication of what is wrong. The idea of looking at math as the only venue of critical reasoning and critical understanding, of analytical thinking, of data interpretation, is a very, very, very difficult thing for me to accept, because that limits the scope of these different brain functions that I'm talking about. Because the idea of expanding the brain function through education, I think, is the fundamental aim of the education system, right? The reason I say that we need to expand on these ideas is because there are several skills that you use in order to acquire these kind of tools. These skills, when put to the practice, these students are able to grasp them. They can use it for life. I do feel there are so many unused skills among us humans because we are not aware of it or whatever, that we don't use. And industries or jobs or business sectors could be created of just these simple little skills, and yet because we have not focused on this, or we have not diversified our education to include these things, we have created a society that's very narrow-minded. The basic idea, you might all know, is a student that comes out of India either wants to do engineering or MBBS, and that's basically the whole point, right? We have created a very narrow way of thinking for our children, that the aims and focus of this require maths, physics, chemistry. Maths, physics, chemistry is just memory, repetition, very little critical reasoning and critical understanding going in. Now, of course, people that study for JEE are very different. They acquire skills in those trainings that are incredibly useful in solving very complex problems, whether they are mathematical or not mathematical. And that level of analytical thinking really does change or wires your brain in a different way. And that's exactly what I am looking for in our normal common state syllabus education, except I don't want it like JEE, in the sense that JEE focuses very specifically on maths, very specifically on physics, very specifically on chemistry. I would like those concepts to be used universally. Things like spatial understanding, critical reasoning, analytical reasoning, data interpretation to be used more universally rather than just in math. And I honestly think it can be done. Like I said, the resource available to this is so ubiquitous. It's very difficult to give an argument against not doing it. And to have, basically, the dream would be to have hyper-intellectuals coming out of schools. Hyper-intellectuals, not just because they're able to solve complex problems, but they're also able to look at life and say, okay, if I have a job, I got some money. If I do business, I got some money. Now, if I use the skills that I've learned in school and I do a business, I make some money. That's great, isn't it? So we should be taking steps to make sure that happens. Today, somebody that finishes 10th or 12th standard really doesn't have any skills, and they usually don't have the ability to start a business. They don't even know how to start a business. They don't know what it entails. And this is where I'm coming to the specific topics, right? Let's start with economics. So when I was in school, so I took the science branch, basically, and there was the other branch called the commerce branch in 11th and 12th. So they learned economics, but we learned economics in 9th and 10th standard. In social studies, I think 1 or 2 lessons. And one of the issues I had with that was that we learned was macroeconomics. We first of all didn't learn microeconomics, and even the economics we learned was just terrible. We learned a bunch of laws. We learned a bunch of things like, of how macroeconomics works. Very little information, useless information, if I may add. 11th and 12th, I'll not review the course, but I'm guessing that most of the concepts there are macroeconomic courses of strategic thinking of how to implement economic strategies at large scale, meaning India level. basically everybody that comes out of 12th standard becomes an economist that can run the central government, Federal Reserve, and all of those things. And I do think there's a lot of fallibility to just focusing on macroeconomics. We have to also start diversifying into sincere microeconomics. Now, microeconomics, the problem with that is that even if there are plenty of studies on it, a lot of the actual microeconomic work has to take place practically. So basically what I'm saying is, when a 12th standard student takes an economics course, see, if they're learning 10 lessons, I don't know how many units they're learning, 10 or 20 or whatever, reduce the portions, give them 15, the remaining 5 lessons, give them a project, make them do a project that is equivalent to those 5 lessons, so that they can take the models that they are learning and actually implement them in real life. Challenge the students to take what they learn and to apply them in real life, and let them see what challenges arises. People usually don't buckle out of challenges. They usually run towards a challenge. The only people that look at a challenge and just stop are usually not motivated. But if you show them the way, meaning you do 1 or 2 mini projects and then lead up to a big project, when they see that some of these difficult goals can be achieved, they are motivated to complete them. This is how we should be modeling our school education system. Like I said, you don't have to have half practical and then half theory. You can have 75% theory, 80% theory, but at least 20% practical and real practical. If you're giving 20 marks, just give real 20 marks. Let it be based on merit for the work product. We do this and people will understand economics like crazy. People that, what this does is basically, if you do this through commerce, accountancy, and economics, students will see the value of each and every one of them, the value in studying each and every one of them. And maybe some students are interested in commerce, some students are interested in accountancy, some students will be interested in economics. The problem is that the stimulus for this today is just self-interest, right? But rather, if we make them do practical things, practical everyday things, there might be a stimulus that is more than just self-interest, but rather a stimulus of, okay, I've seen something today, this is inspiring, but I've seen 3 other inspiring things, and I have something to choose from. If we can give our students this choice, it would be wonderful. Right? The idea that physics and chemistry has practicals is great, because at least we see something in action. Now, I want to focus a little bit more on the science education work, because I do feel there's a lot of disconnect. Right? So today, if you look at the physics field, it is vast, right? There is Newtonian mechanics, and there's so much that has been derived from Newtonian mechanics, and one of the fundamental creations of Newtonian mechanics is thermodynamics, and thermodynamics has been the gateway for so many inventions. Newtonian mechanics was instrumental in understanding some basic concepts of light. We always thought light as a waveform, because of concepts of electromagnetism, which arrived after Newtonian mechanics. But the idea of Newtonian mechanics creating tools like differentiation, integration, what those tools like differentiation and integration have done is that it has helped us understand concepts of electricity and magnetism in more detail. Once we got that understanding, we were able to develop understanding of light, and then later on we understand light as a particle. Then with those 2 understandings, we start developing through Einstein special theory of relativity, general theory of relativity, taking concepts of centrifugal and centripetal force, and then flipping it, saying gravity is different. I mean, it's so vastly different from the simplistic model that Newton gave us. And this is basically how any field develops, right? This is how the physics field is going. The physics field is doing all of this. And in doing all of this, they are studying the nature of atoms. They're studying the ionization of atoms. They are creating new phenomena. They're not just saying that there's matter in the form of solid, liquid, and gases. They're saying there's solid, liquid, gas, plasma, and then there are two other particles, two other states of matter. And it's very interesting when you think about it. When you think about the fact that physics has expanded, it has gone from 3 fundamental matters in the universe to 6 fundamental matters in the universe. And yet our physics education is becoming more tailored towards engineering. And this is such a sad thing. I mean, it pains me to know that there is so much happening in the physics field, and the only place where you can get pure physics education is in school, apart from the Bachelor of Physics course. But even in this field, we are just giving terrible coursework, telling them to learn engineering. I mean, engineering is like a small brother, is something that's derived out of physics. It's underneath physics. And somehow we have tried to glorify engineering above physics because it gives us a better job opportunity, it gives us salary or whatever, and what we have taken away is pure physics out of our syllabuses and created engineering into our syllabuses. Now, I would understand if you do this and you say, okay, people that come out of 12th standard, they're going out and creating jobs, they're innovating, they're being entrepreneurs. If you told me all of that, I would agree, okay, do more engineering, that's good stuff. But that's not what's happening. Yeah, it's basically, what can I say? It's basically, these 11th to 12th standard courses are basically created as a stepping into college, basically. What they've taken is they've taken the first 10 pages of a college textbook, put it on your physics textbook. And there's a lot of danger to doing that. A lot of danger, because what you're doing basically is you are not really fulfilling the purpose of what a school education is supposed to provide. You see, there was a time when you could become a teacher with 10th standard education, then it's 12th standard education. Today, to be a teacher, you need to have a bachelor's degree, then a B.Ed. Personally, I don't have a problem with this because teaching is a very, very, very specific profession where a lot of education should have gone into before the teaching happens. But my basic question is, do you really need to learn BSc Physics to teach, say, primary school, 1st standard to 5th standard? Because honestly, I don't think so. I mean, what in the world? The BSc English for teaching 1st standard to 5th standard. There is some kind of disconnect happening when this kind of stuff starts coming. Now, if you're teaching specifically maths or English, or let's say science, because science also comes in, right? If you're teaching these subjects, 1st standard to 5th standard is not that hard. It's not that hard to teach these things. So I do have some problem with how we are thinking of education and job opportunities, because I think we're leaving out a lot of potential. The reason why these things concern me and why I'm raising these points is not because I don't want people to learn college. But you see, I've seen a lot of people drop out of college not because they didn't have the money, but because they couldn't complete it. Yeah. Whether those are hard courses or easy courses. A lot of people drop out because they're not motivated. See, the problem with our education system is that it promises you nothing, but it tells you keep studying, do master's degree, do PhD, do postdoctoral, and then you become a teacher, a professor, and then you again keep studying. And this idea of gaining infinite knowledge, countless degrees, commendations, it's really holding us all back, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah. If you look at the balance of net benefit to net loss, I don't think it's net benefit. I think it's a net loss. Today, people that study master's degree in many courses don't really get jobs proportional to what they've earned. Many people. For bachelor's degree, again, this is also true. Right? What is happening is we're creating a workforce that is highly educated. So we're creating a supply of educated workforce, but we don't have a demand for it. There are, of course, many reasons for it. One is because you don't have the entrepreneurial mindset. So only if you have the entrepreneurial mindset, you will have jobs to give to people. I mean, there are countries where there are so many jobs available. We have to fill in people from outside the country into those jobs. Our country is not like that. Our country is not a job-creating economy. It's a job-seeking economy. And this is the reason why too many people with high degrees and specific degrees, it'll create an issue. It's already created a lot of issues. A lot of people finish college and they don't have a relatable job. They finish engineering, they don't do engineering. It's not like this is a very uncommon thing. It's very common. And what's interesting about this whole thing is that our colleges are, including so many engineering engineering syllabus requirements in maths, physics, and chemistry and even computer. But unfortunately, if you want to teach computer in 8th standard, 9th standard, 10th standard, that becomes an issue. They're like, oh, so you want to create people that know computer skills so that they can enter into the job market. A school only for entering into the job market. Well, I think that's a very, very bad argument because, yes, you study in school so that when you finish it, you can enter into a job market or you can create businesses that give jobs. This idea that learning computer science at school level is a bad idea is crazy, I'd ask the same question: why should we learn physics or chemistry in school, but not computer? Why? I don't understand the connection between learning physics and chemistry is okay, yeah, but studying computer is bad. It really doesn't hit me, and I'm very sorry. It just doesn't. I don't agree with this. I think it's foolish to think of education that way. The non-negotiables are history and geography because those are essential to know. You have to know the history, your local history, your country's history. You have to know your state's history, the kings of the region's history, everything, right? After that, everything else is actually, it's beyond the scope of the education system, actually. So everything else that you learn is actually you're learning for skills for the job market. So the idea that children should not be taught computer science courses, it's very foolish if I'm being absolutely honest with you. It really doesn't reconcile with me why that is wrong. But there are a lot of arguments for it, for why that is wrong. And people hating White Hat Junior. Now, I don't know what White Hat Junior is. I just see the memes. But I don't know. Is it really that bad to teach young children computer science? I honestly don't think so. I don't think so. It's thinking like that is actually putting your child behind the progress mark. Kids all over the world are learning skills like robotics and computer science. And if you're telling me those are bad skills, you have to go and check whatever, because there's something absolutely wrong with that kind of thinking. But yeah, and I do feel like this hyper focus on just science is also kind of detrimental. One of the reasons is because, when you look at archaeological studies, people that learn history and excavations and all this, you don't really have too many jobs for it. You don't have jobs for it because people are not interested, right? People, when they get into a job, they want to buy food, clothing, shelter. Archaeology is like, it's really not anybody's passion if we're being absolutely honest here. There's no money to be made in archaeology except in the trade business. If you find a great thing, you can sell it and make a lot of money, but even that's not possible in India. You have to give heritage stuff to governments and politicians. So the whole motivation for being in the history field is very little because research is not done there. And I think it's bad and good. It's bad because it means that history is a dying field. It's good because history is not the most important field, but it's necessary. Especially if you're going into the political field or if you're trying to understand the world as it is today, which is very important in business. Very important to understand how successful people did stuff. And when we learn about kings that ruled for many years and they ruled very well, the people liked them, actually liked them, right? You have to understand that they did something right. It was not just giving away freebies or whatever, but it was creating jobs, it was boosting the economy, it was culturally being affable, socially being affable, and all those other aspects. And we need to value those skills, and only history can teach us some of those valuable skills. But again, not only history, there are other topics. I'm just talking on a more temporal level. History is a very good way of learning what works and what doesn't work. Just learning about communism and capitalism. Again, both systems have their flaws and strengths and weaknesses, but if you look at the net result, it's very easy to say that capitalistic societies have flourished much better. And how do you know that? It's because there's historic record. But who's keeping historic record? See, there are records created. People write books and they sell, they make money. But to actually compile them and make them part of history has to be somebody's job. That kind of job is never done in today's day and age. What we think of history is, okay, there's a database, and let's just throw it all into that database. Somebody will somehow figure it all out and put it out in history. Well, that's interesting and not interesting. Because unfortunately today what's happening is the people who actually keep history are journalists. And, I think that's a terrible idea. I'm really sorry, but I think that's a terrible idea, to give journalists the power to keep history. Because here's the thing, journalists can be easily bought and paid for, basically. They don't do analytical studies on many things. They know how to report news, that's it. There are people that write reports based on analysis, in history. Those are historians. They don't really find reports, they don't really find results, interesting things. They record them. They put them in sequential order. They study the timeline. They study the different facets of it to give reports and results. To give journalists the access to that kind of power of keeping records is fatal, because journalists have got very strong opinions, and to have very strong opinions is really detrimental in some of these fields. Not all, but in some of these fields. And this is why I think we need people that have got fully formed brains, not just memory skills, to go into the history field, don't we? One thing that's again interesting is that even the history field today uses computerized technology. And again, this reinforces the point that even if you don't end up doing something related to computer science, even if you're doing geography, today all weather reports are given by satellite data, image processing, sound processing, study of winds and seas, sensors. Right? Basically, you need to have computer science skills, computer programming skills, if you're a geologist too. Whether you're studying a rock, whether you're studying the weather, whether you're studying volcanoes, whether you're studying patterns of the earth, whether you're studying, formation of seas and lands and mountains, you need to have basic computer science skills. So how is it that learning computer science is not good, but physics and chemistry is okay? When in fact even physics and chemistry today uses computer, massively. The idea that a fully formed brain with all of these information, like analytical skills, critical reasoning, detail-oriented, crisp-oriented, meaning people that can take large data and compress it, people that can take small data and expand on it. All of these abilities are crucial, not just for science and math, crucial in every field. So the school must be able to develop those skills. We should have syllabuses that develop those skills. And the emphasis on developing those skills should be at least till 10 standard. It should be there. At least till 10 standards. Those standards of just brain development, pure brain development should be the only standard to 10 standard. We want our children to study BE in IIT, so from 6th standard they study that portion. I'm sorry, that's not good enough for society. It's good enough for the engineering field. A lot of people going in, and so only the best come out, and the best eventually only study engineering. But not really, is it? It's not really the case. Society does not just want engineers. All these engineers, what are we going to do? So this is the problem we have, right? Our kids no longer can think critically. Not because the kid or the way they grew up, but because the school doesn't give them the opportunity to. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The idea that kids should learn 10 lessons of this. Why? See, I don't have a problem if the syllabus is reduced. I have a problem when the reduced syllabus has no quality in it. That's my issue. There's no quality in the education we are giving. What we are telling them is to study and memorize voluminous amount of information. Information which fraction of which they might use in their life. And that's sad. Let me give you a small example. I only know how to create a business 8 years after passing out of school. I know only how to create an income tax return or whatever 8 years after finishing school. And it's okay to have income tax returns when you have an income. But why is it that our children don't have a knowledge of these things? How is it our children don't understand that taxes? Forget about income tax. They don't understand taxes. Every commodity you buy in the market, Maggi noodles, has got tax on it. Students in our schools and colleges, they don't know what that tax is doing. They don't know that education is not free. Hospitals are not free. And the government is doing all this stuff for free out of the tax they're taking out of the things you're buying. The point that consumerism is what drives governments to do these social programs should give these kids an idea of, wait a minute, when I consume a product, the company is making a profit. The government is getting some money to do other things, to make production or whatever. But I'm just finishing the product, finished. See, this level of understanding can be given in basic economics classes in 9th and 10th standard. You can just introduce these concepts. That's it. Tell them to go and explore. Give them a project to explore. Why do you have projects in 9th and 10th standard? Do this. Do this kind of stuff. Then people will have an interest in economics or commerce or whatever. With math, think about it. Image processing uses so many tools of maths. If you show these kids 1 or 2 examples, that's enough. That's enough. The best way to teach math, to help a student understand the application of math, is through computer science. So give projects on mathematical problems. Give them those projects. Tell them to come up with solutions. We are missing everything. See, there's such life we can give to our schools that we're not giving. A lot of people will say that all the things I'm saying cannot be done because there are people that come from poor backgrounds that cannot cope up with this. I'm sorry. It's not really true. Not at all. Kids learn fast, and if you teach them correctly, they can learn it fast. You must have competent teachers, actually, to do all of this. And that's the basic. And if people tell you that teachers only come from, competent teachers only come from a particular caste or something, well, just be respectful to them, right? And tell them you disagree, because that's not really true. I know so many people that studied Tamil for 10 years. They still don't know how to read and write fully because they just learned for the exams, and the reason is not because they didn't learn properly. Yes, they didn't learn properly, but the reason is because they were not interested in it. Tamil was so hard for the people I know that study Tamil that they would rather not have it, and they are very, very enthusiastic about the Tamil language and speaking it and preserving it, but not really happy with the way the education system, the school education system, runs its Tamil program. It's the same with the Hindi program. I mean, tone it down a little bit, people. I mean, language education, even if it's hard, should be meaningful. And even if it's hard, people should be interested in it. Unfortunately, only 1% of the students that learn any language in India are actually interested in what they're learning. The reason is because of the way the education system is. You see, there are so many people that learn new languages. They are born in Tamil Nadu, they know Tamil and English. They learn Hindi also a little bit. So they know a little bit of Hindi. They go and work in Kerala, they learn Malayalam. They go and work in Karnataka, they learn Kannada. But they don't learn to read and write Malayalam and Kannada. They just speak it. Basically what that means is people are interested in speaking in different languages, right? Very interested. And speaking is the most common form of communication. In any language, take any language on earth, speaking is the most common form of communication, except for sign language. And yet somehow, in our education, you can memorize things, memorize concepts, and just go and write in the exam. And that's it. The only thing you are giving children knowledge of is writing skills, not even reading skills. And that's fascinating. To have learned a language for 10 years and not be able to read it properly. Wow. That's some education system, huh? Some education system. Here's the thing to you educators who set the syllabus, right? Shame on you. The simplest thing you could do, and here's the proposal: bring in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Each component must have its own exam: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And with these components, if you teach these 4 components, I ensure you, people will be more interested in the languages they're learning. People will be more competent in the languages they're learning. Their ability to learn a new language will be huge. Their ability to understand complex information in other unrelated subjects will be huge. Their neurological pathways will be amazing. And they would have an actual skill. Have reading, writing, listening, and speaking in equal quantities or unequal quantities, I don't know. If we had an emphasis on this, during this pandemic time, we could have conducted online exams for both English and language. And we could have done it. For listening, right, it can be done through online. In fact, it has to be done through online. For speaking, for reading, again, online. For writing alone, you would have to conduct the normal exams that are conducted today. For all the other 3, you just need a lab. You need a lab. If you have a lab, You can actually do it. If you put 50% on reading, speaking, and listening, and then the next 50% on writing, that's it. This again brings me to how we are teaching our kids who learn physics and chemistry to learn for engineering, preparing them for engineering. You are preparing language students to do BA English, or BA French, or whatever, BA Tamil. You're preparing them for literature studies. I'm sorry, my friend, that's not how it should be. People that come from the school system should have a recognizable reading, writing, listening skill and speaking skill in the languages they're learning. Only if they're able to show evidence of these core competencies has the Indian education system done any good. Whether that's Indian or state, I don't care, but this is how it should be. It's just so unfortunate that you say this to anybody and they'll say it's difficult. Any teacher, any person in the education ministry of states, they'll tell you it's difficult. It's not. And then some people, for ideological reasons, will say no. Because, if you teach them these skills, they will become good in life. Yeah. There are those people. Or you can take a hike, because go to the mountains and don't come back for a week. Because this is absolute nonsense. You have no recognizable language skill. After having learned a language for 12 to 14 years, is such a shame. It's not necessarily a shame of the student studying. It's a shame of the syllabus that has been set. In fact, I don't even blame the teachers in this case. Teachers can only teach from what they've been given. It's such a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. I'm appalled, basically, by the way we learn languages in school. So on the concept of hoarding of education and education streams into one field, everybody learning engineering, everybody learning medicine, I want to talk a little bit about vocational studies, right? So I think the Tamil Nadu government or Indian government, I don't know which one, provides a few vocational streams. Their courses and syllabuses for 11th and 12th. And my point is this: encourage students to do that. I know people who, when they finished 10th standard, they said, I'm going to become a chef. I'm going to do hotel management. My parents are telling me to finish 11th and 12th, and so I'm going to take the easiest possible way in 11th and 12th. I'm going to finish those parts and directly go and become a chef and learn hotel management and cooking and all of that. So my question is, why does that guy have to learn core economics and commerce and accountancy? Well, he can learn accountancy and commerce, I guess, a little bit of math and computer maybe. But that guy doesn't need to learn economics. Even if you want to teach him, give him a crash course. He doesn't need everything. This is the problem, right? So for a guy like that, vocational course is the best recourse. He would have taken a vocational course if it was offered in my school. The problem is, vocational courses are rarely offered in government schools, and they are not offered in any private school. Here's the proposal. A school can only hold higher secondary courses, 11th and 12th standard, if they offer one branch which gives vocational training. You bring this role, and I tell you something. There will be a diversity of skills in the job market. I can assure you, many people will take those courses. Many people will take those courses. Because a lot of people don't like this nonsense that's going on. So they would take these vocational courses. A lot of people have a clear idea of what they want to do, and they realize that science or social studies or commerce or whatever is not going to help them. Vocational studies is great for these people. But in vocational studies, make sure you give them proper skills, updated skills. Don't just teach a guy lathe. Teach him computational lathe, modern day robotic lathe. Yeah? Take those courses to the next level, but you teach him those vocational skills. If you will mandate that every private school should have at least one vocational course in order to have their status as a school that provides higher secondary education, let me tell you something. Skill level or the diversity of skill will increase immediately. Students will take it up immediately. But the skill has to be valuable in the market, basically. So that's also important. But they will pick it up like that. Because here's the thing, right? I've seen the MBA admission exam, the entrance exam. It's very hard, but the syllabus does not go beyond 10th standard scope. Simple point. Every student that comes out of 10th standard should be able to write that exam with relative ease. But that should also tell you something. That should tell you that a person can actually study 2 years of a business course with just 10th standard. They don't need 12th standard. They don't need a degree. They can study a business administration course when they finish 10th standard. The reason why I'm limiting everything to 10th standard is because I recognize that till 10th standard, kids should be kids. They should not be forced into job kind of stuff. But after 10th standard, it's different. That's why it's called secondary school, and then it's called higher secondary school. Because higher secondary school already becomes a form of higher education. Vocational training. Think about it. If you just give a vocational training saying, this course offers business administration, I will tell you, people will flood. I think it is wonderful that a person can learn business without bachelor's degree. And he does not have to wait for 6 years of his life, average, to complete his 12th standard and his bachelor's degree, to go and then do a master's in bachelor's administration. Now, hear me out. Master's in business administration will always be valuable. It will always be the big thing. Because let's say you finish BE engineering and then you do an MBA, a tech industry guy will say, okay, your business administration skill will be suitable for my industry. But just to give you some context, if you want to work in the banking sector, if you want to work in hedge funds, investment banking sectors, if you want to work in mutual funds, you don't need all these other engineering or medicine skills or whatever. When they say technical analysis of the stock market or whatever, you don't need all that stuff. But I challenge offer a vocational business administration course in schools and make it compulsory. People will just take it. A lot of people will take it. Now here's the question, right? If a lot of people take it, should there be jobs available to give those kids jobs? Basically, that's the whole point, right? Most of the kids that come out of 12th standard are 18 years old. This is the fundamental question. An 18-year-old is allowed to work according to the law. Of course, a lot of kids that come out are 17 years old. maybe they can do an internship. That's my point. Kids should have the freedom to do that. If you do things like this, a lot of people will not stop learning. They will not run away from the system. Today, a lot of people are running away from the government system. They're trying to run black market businesses. They're trying to run legitimate business, but without paying taxes. People will not do that if you do things like this. People do that if they feel cheated by the government. If the government syllabus offers a hope for life, they would trust the government more. They would trust the governments in saying, okay, this government gave me a syllabus that has helped me in this life. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a business. I'm going to do it legitimately and pay my taxes so that another student who comes up will be benefited from it. Just the way I would. Most people that come out of school feel cheated. It's 14 years of life. Now here's the other thing, man. We must have employers also. So the people that are employing should not say, oh, you need to have a bachelor's degree, otherwise we won't hire you, or a master's degree. And I think there has to be change in the way employers think also. I think this also has to change. I do think this has to change the way employers think about these things. Because there's a lot of gatekeeping going on in companies. There are some companies that are actually removing those gates. If you look at US, this is very prevalent. Google hires people that finish school, that's it. Even without a degree, they hire people. So if a major multinational corporation that does complex mathematical and computational problems is hiring people out of school, are you telling me nobody else can? Telling me that the problems you are facing or you're doing in life are more complex than what Google is doing. And if it's interpersonal skills are what you're looking for, well, guess what? If students are made to do language education, English education, where they have to read in front of a class of 20 people for marks, they will do it. And when they do that, they get the strength and courage to actually have interpersonal skills. When they have to speak with the teacher in order to get marks, they will hone that skill, they will improve that skill. If you marry a language education which has reading, writing, listening, and speaking with vocational training, you will create a entrepreneurial class right out of school. They don't have to learn a 4-year bachelor's of engineering degree. They can learn a 1-year skill course. And they can just immediately start a business. Not only can they start a business, they will have the confidence to start a business. And they will have the know-how to start a business. You see, these are all missed opportunities. I'm sorry, these are missed opportunities. It does pain me a little bit that we are not doing this. Think about people with disabilities. People with learning disabilities, physical disabilities. They will choose these kind of vocational courses. Two, it helps them too. It helps other people too. Other people that have a passion will also do this. Let's say, for example, your aim is to work in an NGO. The basic work in an NGO is catching people who contribute to the cause and then working as an events manager or whatever to further the cause. You don't need to learn science for this. You need to learn event management skills and organizational skills, the ability to speak and interact with people, to clearly convey ideas. We can teach that in vocational. They don't have to study engineering and then join an NGO and then whatever. In fact, if you want to really do research on these topics, we have masters in social studies, bachelors in social studies. If you want to really do research on it, go and do a master and bachelor's degree. If you just want to work, you don't have to do master's and bachelor's degree. And I ask hirers, do they really need a bachelor's and master's degree to work in these environments? We have to start respecting The problem here is not that we don't think it cannot be done by anybody. The problem is that we don't respect people who come out of school and the skills they have. We don't respect those kids. What we are doing is disrespectful to the kids who come out of school. But we have, as a society, have internalized it, saying it's okay, this is how the world is. It's just not acceptable. This vocational stuff, it should not just be in government school, it should be compulsory in private schools too. The number of people that will do that course, you have no idea. Absolutely no idea. And a lot of people will be happy for it, mind you. A lot of people might feel cheated, but a lot of people will feel happy for it. The number of people that feel cheated will be minimal, will be almost zero. Because if you're seeing the number of people that are cheated or people that feel cheated, I will tell you there's so many people that learn science and engineering that feel cheated, that learn science and medicine, that don't have a proper job or whatever, they feel cheated. So this feeling of getting cheated is not just restricted to vocational courses. So we have state education ministries and education ministers. So these are the people that are responsible for all of this, right? Administrative level, at a course level, syllabus level, at all the levels, the education ministries there. They've got education secretaries, and then they've got their secretaries. Everybody's got their secretaries, and so this is how it is usually run. And then there are levels. If you finish some IS or whatever, you go into this education ministry and you work. First question is, what are these people doing? Yeah. Why in the world are they setting crazy syllabus for students that doesn't really help them at all? Why are the committees they form forming the syllabuses so out of touch with reality? It does pain me a little bit to know that this is how it is. Why is it for teacher selection there are issues? Why are PTAs a problem? Why are teachers' attendance a problem? Why is the hiring model of teachers a problem? All this does fall at the feet of the education ministry. So the first thing I'm going to say is about the hiring of teachers, right? So now we all know, basically, I hope everybody knows, that there are a lot of illegal practices that go on in hiring practices, in teachers hiring. Not everybody goes through the illegal means, but a lot of it happens through legal means, and it's unfortunate, but it happens, right? First of all, here's how teaching should be. Teaching should have consequences. If you teach well, students get more marks or do better in life, you get promoted faster. If they don't do better, the question then becomes, is it a problem of the teacher, or are the students the problem, or the infrastructure the problem? The last place to look at is the teachers. I agree. Last place to blame something will be the teachers, because they're the human element, right? But they should have to face some consequences. Our system today just has no consequences. They can have 10 students, of which 3 have the possibility of passing, but even if everybody fails, when the pay revision comes, they still get the pay revision. The point is not that the students, there were 10 in the class and 3 had the possibility of passing. The point is everybody failed. Even the 3 that had a possibility failed. So why is that? Is it because those 3 didn't do everything well? Or is it because the teaching was not good? We need to have consequences for actions. And teachers should feel the brunt of it. I extend this to education ministers even, or people working in the education ministry even. They all should face some consequences of their actions. The reason I say this is because there are places where, remote places, where when a teacher gets a government job, they get reassigned, or when they get a promotion, they get reassigned. And you know what they do? They take leave. They take health leave or whatever leaves. And they don't go there. During that 4-month health leave that they've taken, they look for a transfer to another school. You know, that creates one less teacher in the classroom. And this is not just a thing about village schools. Now, village schools are the people that suffer the most because teachers do this very often. But transfers affect city schools also. The position that is vacated is not filled, and we all know what the reasons are. But in the villages, many of these teachers, they don't go. Those students suffer. Now, this is very specific to the government schools. In private schools, this will be very much controlled. I mean, this will not fly, because if you don't really attend school, you'll be kicked off, you'll be sent home, you'll be fired. The government system just does not do that. It doesn't fire anybody. And I think that's an issue. This is what I talk about when I'm saying consequence-based teaching. So let's say a person got a transfer to a place. They don't like the transfer place. Okay. Compulsorily work there for a year. But in the meantime, get a transfer. Let there be a regulation in place that the person that has asked for transfer in a reasonable time frame should be transferred, basically. I mean, we can do that. I'm not against that. I'm not against people asking for a transfer. I'm against people that don't work. They accumulate their sick leaves and then they do this kind of thing. This should be avoided. Yeah, this should be avoided. A genuine sick leave is a very different thing. But this kind of nonsense should be avoided. Now, one of the reasons why I say accountability is important is because when you look at village schools or even mildly government schools in general, the lab facilities in these places are very terrible. And one thing I've noticed is that the reason for this is not because the government does not supply the correct equipments or whatever. The government supplies the PTA. The PTA is basically run by the rowdies and the gang leaders of an area. It seems that all of these lab equipments are routed through the PTA. What the PTA does is they take it and they sell it in the black market, make money, and they give nothing to the schools. And this is a problem, right? I don't know what the regulations for the PTA are, who can be a PTA member, but at the very least, we should give PTA role only to a parent of a student, firstly. Secondly, if this is the practice of the PTA member should be changed every 2 years. And no PTA member can repeat his role over a period of 10 years. They cannot occupy a PTA member role for 10 years after their time is finished. These are harsh regulations, but these are absolutely necessary regulations. This is the only way we can save our government schools, because our taxpayers' money is going into it. But if this is how it is run, we have to change. And if the problem is not that the government is not doing anything, the problem is that local bodies and ground level workers are itself doing all of this kind of nonsense, we need to change a lot of things. Now, I understand that at a macro level, our state governments are also doing all kinds of nonsense in the education ministry, but the problem in the education system is not just macro, it's micro also. Micro problems are in fact more damaging than the macro problems, in my opinion, because they have completely denied anything. An imperfect macro system can be accepted. A good imperfect macro system can be affected. But a terrible micro system is terrible anyway, irrespective of the goodness of the macro model. The micro model, if it is terrible, the whole system just collapses. That's what's happening. And things like this have to change. Absolutely. Now, people that have heard this conversation today, that I've given you all, will think, okay, it would be better if one person had control to all of this. Well, nonsense. It is good that the states hold the education ministry, not the central government. Because think about it. The central government changes every 5 years. Yeah? if suppose that central government comes in and changes the education policy like crazy, that affects 1 billion people. If there's a terrible state government, okay, that affects like maybe 50 million people or 100 million people at the most. But if you have a centralized education system for the country, one wrong government will kill 1 billion people. I mean, the stakes are too high for this to be centralized at the federal level. So this argument of having one education system all over the country is nonsense, in my opinion. It's not helpful. Again, it's not helpful because, the way these systems can be corrupted is just so huge. I just talked about the PTA and the teachers' problem, the problem with the state government education system. I didn't go deep into it because it's a bag of worms. That's it. It's a bag of worms. But the impact is reduced depending on the state, right? There are some states that have their education system running very well and it's profiting the children, but some states aren't. If you just bring everything together in one country, the whole country will either go good or the whole country will go bad. That's not good. That's not good at all. The other thing is the question of native language, right? The idea of studying the native language alone is problematic with a lot of people, because I do think we need to preserve the diversity of languages that we have. When you look at countries like Russia or China that have crushed the dialects, it's sad, Chinese, before the Communist Party government, had a lot of dialects, and they still do, but a lot of it has been just subsided. Russia, same thing. A lot of unique languages. It's crushed. And, it's actually sad, because cultural identity, linguistic identity is very important, and we're losing that. So I do think this is bad for that. History, right? You have to understand that our country was made in 1947. The idea of India was not really an Indian idea. It was a European idea. The Europeans thought, okay, Indians have spices. That's it. You have to understand that throughout the lifetime, for as long as there is recorded history, if you look at today's map of India, okay, and then include Afghanistan and all those places that are there before independence, you have to understand that no one king held all the land from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Not one person has ever held the land. The closest that came to ruling all the land was Ashoka. Even Ashoka couldn't conquer all of South India. Even he couldn't conquer all of South India. So you have to understand that the historical contexts are very important. We were a country that was formed from 576 princely states. I think my numbers are a little bit off, but 570 something. We're a country that's formed from 575 princely states. Yeah, there's a lot of diverse history, and we will lose this if there's only one education in the whole country. If you look at South India, there have been so many strong and powerful kings. You will not include that. North India has got so many different powerful kings over this period of time. The only difference is that many of the kings that were powerful were able to rule more land in North India. And so a lot of the North Indian regions were kind of united. The other problem with just having one education system is that if one person taints the history of the education, it affects everybody. Another person will come and say, you're lying. The person who first wrote will say, you are lying. And so we don't know who's lying and who's telling the truth. And so the problem is not that everybody's lying, because the people are intelligent enough to figure out the truth. The problem is that when you make these ambiguities, it affects 1 billion people. At the state level, you can control the fallout because the numbers are smaller. This is why decentralization is crucial to the Indian education system. Absolutely crucial. So even if I have problems with the state government doing this and doing that, I think it's achievable. I think the state government, for me to do some kind of activism and bring about change in the education system, is so much easier if I have to deal with the state government than with the central government. Because the state government rules small principalities, small districts and half a district, and my voice is better heard through the state government than through the central government. Absolutely. Decentralization is crucial, in my opinion. And this concept of centralization is dangerous, very dangerous. I think we will lose our original identities, and then we will have a reshaped identity, which I think a lot of people will not accept. Pretty much what I wanted to say about the education system. I think there is more conversation to this. There is absolutely so much more to delve into of how we can solve each and every issue. Hopefully this video or this audio reaches people in government, because I think some of these proposals are extremely possible, and they're just common sense. I mean, especially the language part, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. I mean, those are a given. That should be done, like today. It's crazy that it's not done. So, I hope we can reach that person. I'm not very popular, but hopefully we can reach. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Consider liking the video and comment if you have an opinion. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos of this kind. Thank you.